Mr. Chairman. Dr. Gregory, I'm probably the only one on this panel that's ever written a specification for concrete. I've been writing concrete specs and been involved with it since 1965. And one of the things that pointed out was the fight we had, the contradiction, where people wanted to use fly ash as a hazardous material and not allow it to be used in concrete. I'm without a doubt, I think you would say we want to continue to use fly ash in concrete.
Yes, absolutely.
So we were able to prevail on that. There was quite a fight on that. But I want to learn from the rest of the panel here on this. I think this concept of being able to get down to zero emissions, it can be achieved. It's going to be very expensive to do that, but we can achieve that. But the concern I have is we're just addressing America. We're not addressing our competitors. And we know that Gina McCarthy would come before this panel in years past, and she said, yes, we can do these things, we can lower emissions in America, but it won't really make any difference. She said she recognized that, what it was going to do to the whole greenhouse gas problem of the globe. And she said, we're trying to get people to lead, we're going to lead, and the other nations are going to follow. But it was John Maxwell that said, a leader who has no followers is merely a man taking a walk. And I'm afraid what's happened here in America is we're just taking a walk. We're not getting other nations to follow. Look at greenhouse emissions over the last 16 years. In America, those emissions, and several of you testified, that America is already voluntarily reducing its emissions by 16, and I think, Eisenberg, you might even said 21%. We're already making those reductions. But in the meantime, India has increased its emissions by 235%, and China by 290%. They're not following what we're doing. We're putting ourselves at disadvantage. So what I'd like to hear from you is, why should we expect any other nation to follow our lead? Why are they going to put themselves at a competitive disadvantage by us making that reduction? Why are they going to adopt that? Can Eisenberg, you want to share on that?
So we agree with that sentiment wholeheartedly, and that's specifically why we've called for us to re-engage on the international scale and get a real good agreement in place that is fair and equitable, and we'll make sure that we are not putting ourselves at a disadvantage. It's got to be the backbone of our climate policy.
But how? Don't go 30,000 feet with me. How do we get it? Is it in a trade policy, or what are we going to do to get other nations to adopt so that we're on a level playing field? Because I'm afraid what's going to happen is more and more of our companies, the industrial companies, are going to locate or essentially go offshore and outsource their CO2 emissions because it's going to be cheaper to operate someplace else.
I mean, leakage is a very real concern here, and that's why it's 30,000 foot because we haven't really gone there, but we made a lot of progress last time when we engaged internationally. There's more to be made. We really need to get this right, and there's a lot of different ways to get there.
Give us a policy. How do we adopt, what is a policy that would allow us to be competitive, that would force other nations to adopt a standard that we all are producing it under those low emissions? I see your hand up. I just wanted Eisenberg to finish his thought.
Sure, no,
because I wanted something more specific, not 30,000 feet.
So all countries have to, including all of the major emitters, have to agree to reductions, right? And there can't be this inequity of some countries basically getting a free pass till 2030, 2040, 2050 while we impose stuff on ourselves. It's got to be enforceable. It's got to be transparent. It's got to be pro-trade. It has to be innovative. It has to be enforceable by the WTO. I mean, these are all things that we're going to need to make sure that leakage doesn't happen and that we stay competitive. Aluminum's a good example, right?
Okay, go ahead.
Anyway,
you seem to drift up to 30,000 feet again.
Yeah, I've got 3 discrete policies that can do the job.
Okay.
And some of those are in my testimony. One of them is a border tariff. This is a topic which is extremely difficult, extremely dangerous, and extremely fraught. I don't say that lightly, but it is an option. If we had a border carbon adjustment, that would protect U.S. workers and U.S. industries as long as we decarbonized, and it would advantage us compared to some of those other countries. If they wanted to sell to us, they would have to hit that standard. Second option, something basically like the Montreal Protocol, where you have a sectoral group working together. We have multiple countries coming together, and they all set a standard for emissions for steel. You do that with the EU, you do that with Canada, you do that with Mexico, the United States, you get a bunch of countries together. At that point, they create a market that those other countries can't sell into. Japan, Korea, China, India, they can't enter those markets if they don't hit that standard. So you can either go alone or you can go together. The third thing is you can just be better. You can just have a better product, and that's a combination of procurement and innovation.
Okay, well, thank you. And Dr. Freeman, I do hope you come back. You seem to be colorful in your presentation. I like your passion.
I told Chairman Tonko that when I was in government, I hated testifying. Now that I'm out of government, I love testifying.